Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. I'm the Book Geek, also known as Kiava, and today I want to talk to you about some book-related pet peeves. Now, these are going to be book-related pet peeves and also book reviewer pet peeves, a mixture of just a bunch of book-related pet peeves. Before we get started, don't forget to go ahead and hit that like button and let me know down below in the comment section some book-related things that maybe other people do, or maybe you yourself do these things that kind of annoy you. These are mine. Okay, so I cannot stand it when a book reviewer gives a book a low rating simply because they weren't in the mood to read that book. You not being in the mood has nothing to do with the substance of that book. That's a you problem. That's a you problem, not a book problem. Tell us what the book was about. How did it make you feel? Why don't you like this book, or why do you like this book? Because I don't give a fuck what type of mood you was in. If you're not in the mood to read a certain type of book, put the book down and come back to it when you are in the mood for it. But to just keep reading the book when you're not in the mood for the book, that's a you problem. That's not the book's problem. You didn't give a fair review. Your mood has nothing to do with the substance of the book. I also cannot stand it when reviewers, once again, give a bad review or a low rating to a book based on the format of the book. What does the format have to do with the words that are written on the pages? What does the format have to do with the substance of the book? What does the format have to do with what this book is actually about and what message the author is actually trying to convey? So sometimes some books don't have chapters. You can just read it straight through. They might have like a break or whatever. Sometimes books are broken up into different parts. Sometimes they do have chapters. Sometimes they're written differently, like a mixed media type of format. But regardless of the format of the book, what does that have to do with the actual words on the page and how you're going to enjoy that book? Format has nothing to do with what the story was about. A book can be formatted many different ways and still be enjoyable. Or not enjoyable. But if it wasn't enjoyable, tell me a reason why it wasn't enjoyable to you, regardless of format. Speaking of format, I also don't like it when book reviewers complain about the length of chapters. You do not have to read a chapter completely through. You just don't. You can stop in the middle of that chapter. Dog ear the page. That's what bookmarks are for if you don't want to dog ear the page. You do not have to feel obligated to read that entire chapter. If it's time for me to stop reading, I'm going to stop. Whether it's in the beginning of the chapter, the middle of the chapter, the end of the chapter, I'm going to stop reading when I feel the need to stop reading. What does the length of the chapters have to do, once again, with the substance of the story? Are the length of the chapters taken away from what this story is actually about, from what this author is trying to convey or teach, or this message that they're trying to send out? Let me know, please. Now, I do understand that some authors tend to get very descriptive with their writing. I know I've heard people say Tolkien, the author of The Lord of the Rings, can spend hours describing the scenery, and maybe that elongates the chapters. If that's the case, then, you want to say how you think certain descriptions in the story weren't necessary. Fine. Give me specific reasons why the length of the chapters caused you to give a book a bad review. I also cannot stand this. And I'm sorry if to anybody watching who is also like this. I understand OCD and how things need to match up, and how people are very particular about things, but I don't hate this as much as some other things I'm going to describe, but it annoys me sometimes when people get so angry and frustrated because their books don't match. So like the books of an entire series don't match. Like I can understand that for aesthetic reasons, you want your bookshelves to look a certain way. It has to be aesthetically pleasing. Everything has to match. Everything has to line up. But, I don't get it. Those things just don't mean as much to me as they do to some other people, which is fine. We don't all have to agree on things. In fact, we should not all be agreeing on things. But something as simple and minuscule as books not matching up seems a little silly to me. Something else that annoys me is people being persuaded by other people's reading tastes. No book is ever going to be for everyone. No book is ever going to be everyone's favorite. We don't all have to like the same books, y'all. We don't. And people need to start accepting other people's opinions on books. We don't all have to agree. We don't all have to like the same thing. We should respect one another's differences and one another's opinions, even when we don't agree with them. I'll make exceptions for this when people are being blatantly prejudiced or racist towards a book or an author or the subject matter in a particular book. Of course, this is a gray area. There's always room to debate somebody on something, but for the most part, we don't all have to have the same taste or agree on the same thing or have the same opinions. And I just hate hearing somebody say, oh, I'm not going to read that book because I saw too many bad reviews on it. Or I'm not going to read that book because my friend didn't like that book. Your friend might not like that book, but you might love it. It might be the book of your dreams. If you really want to read this book, read it because you want to read it, not because somebody else didn't want to read it or somebody else hated it. Do what's best for you. Let's not be persuaded by other people's opinions. Let's not be a bandwagon jumper. People love to jump on that bandwagon, don't they? What's the trendy thing right now that everybody is jumping on? Those ugly big red boots. Bandwagon jumpers. Don't be a bandwagon jumper. Be original. Be yourself. Do what you want. You want to read that book? Read that book. Sometimes people are ashamed to read certain books because they're afraid of what other people, their peers, are going to say about them. Oh, I can't read that. That's a young adult book. Read whatever you want to read. Which brings me to my next pet peeve. People saying that they're too old to read a certain book. For children, you don't want them reading certain type of books that have sexually explicit scenes and things of that nature. But for an adult, there is no age limit on what you can read. You can read any book, regardless of the target audience for that book. You can read any book at any age. 18 and up, you can read any book at any age. I hate hearing a grown person who may be in their 20s or 30s saying, I can't read that book because that's a children's book. Or I can't read that book because that's a middle grade book. Or, an older person saying, I can't read that book. That's a young adult book. You can read any book at any age. There is no age limit. Now, there may be a target audience, an age limit according to the target audience that the author wanted to gravitate towards this book. But for the most part, you can read any book you want. I am 35 years old. I read picture books. I read middle grade books. I read graphic novels. I read young adult. I read adult. I just read a mixture of all types of literature, regardless of age, and am able to still enjoy those books regardless of age. I've seen some booktubers and other book reviewers constantly reading middle grade books or children's books and putting them down. And the reason why they're putting them down is because they're saying, I'm not the target audience for this book. This book is not for my age group. So why read it if you're just going to trash the book? Why are you reading this book? Middle grade books tend to teach a lot of valuable lessons that young children and young adults can relate to. And there is something to take from that. I work in a school, and I work with fifth graders, and they read a lot of different children's books and younger and middle grade books, and they have a lot of deep messages in them. And a lot of times they have to write stuff and write themes and talk about these books in depth. And there's a lot that could be taken from those books. So let's not say that just because you're an adult, you can't learn something or gather something from a certain type of book because you think it's beneath you in age. That's not true. People need to open up their minds a little bit more. Forget about the age or the target audience of a particular book and focus more on the substance of the story and what it is trying to teach. Going back to format of a book, why does mass market paperbacks bother you guys so much? Is it because of the size of the book and therefore the text tends to be smaller? Why do they bother you so much? I'm here for the stories. It doesn't matter if it comes in a paperback, a hardcover, a mass market. I'm here for the text. I'm here for the literature. And it doesn't matter the design of what that literature comes in. I also cannot stand it when book reviewers give a book a bad review because they cannot relate to the book, the story, the message. They can't relate to this book based on race, nationality, ethnicity, culture. If you're reading a person of color book or an own voices book and you can't relate to it simply based on race, nationality, ethnicity, culture, because of those things, then you need to broaden your horizons. That's a you problem. That's not the book's problem that you can't relate. That's a you problem. And therefore, the book should not suffer bad reviews because of it. I grew up mostly around black people. I went to an all-black school. I grew up in the city, black neighborhood. And I was still able and am still able to this day to relate to things outside of my environment, outside of what I know and what I grew up with. I didn't limit myself when it came to the type of experiences I wanted to have. So when I see other people reading books about black trauma, black issues, Asian issues, just, something outside of themselves and they can't grasp it, it boggles my mind. Because I'm not Asian, but I know about Asian history. I'm not Native American, but I can relate to their adversities, to their tragedies. Broaden your horizons, educate yourselves, and then maybe you can relate to something other than what sounds, looks, and thinks like you. Go out of your norm. And the book should not have to suffer because you are unaware of things outside of your environment, outside of your norm, outside of what you know. Another one that bugs me is when people get so upset about a cliffhanger. You know when you're watching that show and they leave you on a cliffhanger and you just have to get to the next episode? It's the same thing with literature. They want to keep you coming back for more. If you was a writer, you would want people coming back for more. And what's one way to get people to come back for more? Leave it on a cliffhanger. Don't you want to have something to look forward to in the next story? There's nothing wrong with a good cliffhanger. I mean, unless you're George R.R. Martin and you leave us waiting for years and years and years. Come on, George. Giddy the fuck up. But other than that, I mean, let's see how this whole thing plays out. Speaking of cliffhangers, I also do not like it when people get upset because the author did not hand all the answers to them on a silver platter. Make an inference. Make an inference. Some of you never learned how to make an inference, and it shows. Also, speaking of not being persuaded by other people's reading tastes, can we also stop being book snobs? And what I mean by a book snob is someone who looks down on someone else for reading a certain type of book, which brings me also back to you can read any book at any age. I'm talking 18 and over. You can read any book at any age, even as an adult. But some people, they think they are more sophisticated, more grown up, too mature to indulge in a book that is meant for a younger audience. And they happen to look down on other people who happen to enjoy those books, who might be in their same age bracket or older. Those people I like to call book snobs. We don't like book snobs. I don't like book snobs. Sometimes book snobs also are the ones who believe that audiobooks don't count as reading. Audiobooks are books. You know, a lot of book reviewers, booktubers, people involved in literature, we talk a lot about diversity and inclusivity. And audiobooks is a way for everyone to enjoy books. People who can't see. If you're going to be talking about diversity and inclusivity, let's include everyone so that everyone can enjoy books. And one way for everyone to enjoy books are audiobooks. But the great thing about audiobooks is that anyone can enjoy that book. It doesn't just have to be a certain demographic. It doesn't just have to be people who can't see, people who are blind, who enjoy audiobooks. Anyone can enjoy an audiobook. And frankly, it cuts down on a lot of the time. You know, sometimes people love to read and they just don't have the time to do that. So they'll listen to an audiobook during their drive to work or their downtimes while they're cooking. You know, you can absorb more books and more literature through that particular format. Why does it matter how someone is getting their reading done? Why does that matter to you? Why do you have an attitude about the way in which people absorb literature if you're all about literature? Because those type of people are not all about literature. They are narcissistic book snobs. And they believe that their way of absorbing literature is the best way. And it is not. Enjoy books the way you see fit. And don't let those book snobs deter you. Since we're talking about book snobs, let's just throw this next one in here. Fake allyship. And this is not just about people rallying behind Black people. They could be trying to rally behind any person of color. All races of people should be reading a wide range of diverse books all the time. All the time. Do not just read Black books, books written by Black authors when Black trauma is trending in the media. Do not just read Asian books when Asian hate is trending in the media. Don't just read Indigenous books when Indigenous adversity is trending in the media. These are authors, cultures, ethnicities that we should be reading from all the time. If you are only reading diversely when marginalized groups are being threatened, you are not a diverse reader. You are reading those books because this is the trendy topic of the moment. Which also makes me say this: do not just read Black books, Black authors during Black History Month. You should be reading Black authors throughout the year. Do not just read books written by women during Women's History Month. Do not just read Indigenous work during Indigenous Month. Like, do you get what I'm saying? Do you see the trend here? These are people, these are real fucking people who are going through real things. And we should be diversifying our reading and reading those books throughout the year, at different times of the year, and trying to learn and celebrate different cultures, not just when it's trendy. Speaking of fake allyship, there are some people who they want to diversify their reading. So they're going to make a list of all these books written by Black authors and surrounding Black adversity, Black trauma, Black issues. They're going to get all these books to read. And somehow they still manage to give every single one of those books a low rating, or majority of them a low rating. You are fake. You were not reading to learn. You were not reading to diversify. And frankly, you was not reading for enjoyment. You learned nothing if you read all of those person of color books, Black books, and still managed to give all of them a low rating. We don't need your fake allyship. I also can't stand it when book readers or book reviewers get upset because a book has hard-hitting topics, when it has trauma or adversity or death, when the book is not this utopian. Yeah, sorry. These are the same people that complain about books not being realistic, which is something that I hate. I'm going to get there in a second. But these are the same people who complain about books not being realistic, but get mad when a book gets too real for them. When the book is not a utopian pile of rainbow fluff, it's a problem. Oh, it got too real for you, right? It's too hard. You're the one who likes realistic books, remember? I'm sorry, but real life is messy. Real life is gritty, it's dirty, it's fucking unfair. And not everything can be rainbows and butterflies and sunshine all the time. And that's okay. It's okay to write about and talk about the hard stuff, the unsavory, the disappointing, the traumatic. It's okay. Which brings me to my next comment about people who complain about books not being realistic. Oh, this is the one I hate the most. A book is a work of art. Anything that a person can make up in their mind, create in their imagination, and put it on paper, that's fine and that's okay, and it's possible. Things do not have to be rooted in our reality to be enjoyed. We watch movies all the time in space about creatures that don't exist, about monsters and all types of things that we can only imagine. It's the same thing when it comes to literature. If I can imagine it, it can be written. It does not have to be grounded in our reality. You know, a lot of people grow up and they lose their sense of wonder. They lose their imagination. And if you are someone who just likes to read realistic stories, then that's fine. Go find you a book that is rooted and grounded in our reality. That is fine. But don't get all bent out of shape about magic and fantasy. If you can dream it, you can write it. It doesn't have to be realistic. It's fiction. Anything is possible in a book. Anything. Speaking of things that aren't realistic, people who complain about problematic characters. Problematic characters make for a much more interesting story. I'm sorry, but fuck you. Problematic characters are fucking fantastic. Like I said, it's okay to write about hard stuff and the unsavory, and not everything is going to be rainbow, sunshine, and fluff. Throw some problematic characters in there. You think Game of Thrones would have been as powerful or great as it was without those problematic characters? Without characters like Joffrey and Cersei and Ramsay? Fuck you, problematic characters are great. And at the end of the day, you end up really enjoying those problematic characters. Some of my best and favorite characters from stories are the villains. These type of characters serve a purpose. It doesn't have to be a utopian. Another point I want to make is to diversify your thinking before you try to diversify your reading. Acknowledge diversity before you try to diversify your reading. Otherwise, it's just going to be a problem for you. Which brings me to my next point, that people need to acknowledge the diversity of fears. There is a such thing as cultural fears. Some cultures have different fears than other cultures because some cultures experience different things than others. For instance, Black fears are not the same as white fears. I've seen people who are not Black downplay and downtalk Black horror books because they think they aren't scary. All horror and all fears are not created equal. Stop reading Black horror books if you can't appreciate or understand the different types of fears that are out there. Get out of your bubble. And I think this might be my last point that I'm going to make, but it really irks me when people think that you can only read a certain type of book during a certain time of year or during a certain season. For instance, people who believe that they should only read horror books during the month of October or during the fall season. People who believe you can only read romance books in the month of February. Where the fuck did y'all get these ideas from? First of all, you can read horror books throughout the year, all throughout the year. You can read romance books throughout the year, all throughout the year. You can read any book any time of the year. Now, I understand some people think it's more atmospheric to read a cozy winter book during a snowstorm or during the winter. But honestly, you can read that book anytime you fucking please. You know what I mean? The book is going to transport you to that time, to that season. If it's a book about people being trapped in a snowstorm, something crazy is happening, you can read that book in the summertime, but the book is going to transport your mind to a snowy location. So you don't have to worry about reading that during a real snowstorm or during the real actual winter season. It's called a mind movie. The book is going to create that in your mind and it's going to transport you to that location. Get out of that mindset, y'all. Stop it. All right, I think I'm going to end the video here. Please let me know down below any book related pet peeves that you have, things that irk the hell out of you. I would love to know. I'm pretty sure I'm missing some, but let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye.